Hey there! If you managed to find this video, welcome to the channel, but you're currently watching part 2 of a multi-part review. You can find the first part through the card or the link in the description. If YouTube will let me put links in the description. As night falls during the trip to Luca on the boat with a name that is eerily similar to a friend who helps with my scripting, there's a very important thing to do. Lying on front of the boat is a lonely blitzball, and we get shown a memory of Yoshi attempting a shot for the first time, and Jack showing him how it's done. Although he does so in such a cocky manner that's hindering Yoshi from pulling it off rather than encouraging him. And the game introduces the Jack Shot Challenge, where if you manage to cut off the memories of Jack, you unlock the Jack Shot in Blitzball. And I'd recommend you get this as soon as possible, since you only have one shot to do so before the story progresses, and the only way to get another chance is to go to Kilika and take the boat to Luca. And you won't exactly be getting the opportunity to go back to Kilika for a while. And hey, since I've been talking about Jack recently, it would be a good idea to talk more about the relationship between Yoshi and Jack. Now, if you haven't caught on by now, Yoshi doesn't have the greatest relationship with his father. It's been spelled out the entire game. In obvious ways where the characters straight up say so, but there are some more subtle nods to this fact, like when Waka gives Yoshi Chapu's sword. Not only does it have the special name Brotherhood, while Jack's sword is just called Longsword, but it gets equipped automatically, meaning that Yoshi appreciates a gift from a stranger he knew only for just a day, more than a gift from his own father. And while you could assume Yoshi only feels this way because of how popular Jack was, a later flashback shows that Jack is a severe alcoholic, and that doesn't usually lead to very positive memories for a child. This contrasts heavily with the rest of the party, as Yuna admires her father, while Waka and Lulu don't understand since their parents died when they were very young. But enough of all this serious talk, because it's a new day and Luca is right around the corner, and this tournament is such a big deal that the announcers are covering the players' arrival. Yeah, not their games, but their arrival. Surprisingly enough, Kilika's team has enough players to play after Sin's attack, and turns out the Poseidorox's situation is worse than we thought, as they never actually won a game ever. In fact, they placed last in every single tournament. As the announcer is hyping up the Luca goers, Yoshi gets his hand on a megaphone and starts taunting them about how the Aurochs are going to absolutely destroy them and win the cup. By the way, have you ever seen an event that's been sponsored by God? Because this one is for some reason. Imagine if that happened for a YouTube sponsorship.
Today we're going to be talking about a new game by a veteran team, Hollow Break. But before we get into that, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, God. May his purifying light touch your soul and guide you to heaven.
Right after, we hear the news about the arrival of Maester Micah. He's the person in charge of Spira's governing body, so it's no surprise that his arrival is a big deal. Accompanying him is Seymour Guado, someone who in the PS2 version appears to be a sinister man who looks like he has ulterior motives. While in the HD version, he looks like you just told him a stupid joke about his haircut. One more thing to know about him, he's not actually a human, but a Guado, the main difference between the two being their long and pointy fingers. According to Seymour, his father was able to establish a peaceful relationship between the two races before he died and was sent to the far plane about a fortnight ago. The tournament awaits, but right now there's nothing to do other than wait in the locker rooms with the rest of the team. Waka is out talking with the higher-ups to try and change their opponent, since apparently they've been pitting the Aurochs against the Goers as their first match for years, and I guess nobody noticed? Thankfully, this is the game where they finally get to play a different team, the Albed Sykes, and luckily for them, they've managed to get seeded in a way that if they win, they'll be in the finals. At this point, the game provides the full Blitzball tutorial. Oh my god, there's 12 parts to this tutorial! Thankfully, it doesn't matter right now, since Yuna barges in and tells Yoshi that Orin has been seen in a cafe. Wait a sec, who? Yuna wants Yoshi to come along to learn if Jekt is around, and before you ask how that's related, it's explained that Oron was Braska's other guardian, because of course his other guardian also just so happens to be someone that Yoshi knows. Arriving at the cafe, there's no sign of Oron anywhere, so Yuna and Yoshi decide to split up and ask if anyone's seen him around. Meanwhile, a couple of Ronsos show up, and they don't exactly seem happy to see Kimahri giving them the silent treatment. As they start getting physical about it, Yoshi encourages Kimahri to stop acting like some edgy middle schooler to solve this issue, because that only causes those you're trying to push away to continue to push just to try to get some sort of reaction out of you.
Take him on.
Okay, I may have exaggerated what he said a little bit, but it works out as Kimahri gives a meaty fucking uppercut that knocks one of them out. As the brawl is going on, the tournament's opening ceremony is broadcasted, and the first teams up are the Aurochs versus the Sykes, but there's something more important to focus on, as the fight that Kimahri got himself into caused a distraction, and Yuna has disappeared. As they head out, Lulu runs into them and explains that she's been kidnapped by the Albed, In exchange for her safety, they want Waka to throw the game. Of course, nobody wants to accept those terms, so Waka will be stalling the match until everyone else rescues Yuna. The Al Bhed expected this, however, as they planted small Machina robots on the way to their boat to delay the rescue. And if only there was someone who could exploit their fatal weakness to electricity!
I cast Thunder Spell!
They manage to get into the boat at the last minute, and the Al Bhed deploys a giant Machina robot to stop them. In this boss fight, there's a big ass crane that can be used with a trigger command, which are boss specific commands that give you an advantage. And this was first seen with the boss fight with Riku back in the prologue, where you can flank the boss so it will stop moving away. And in this fight, activating the crane will move apart from the boss, dealing massive damage. However, you will need to spend a few turns giving it power by casting lightning spells on it before you can use it. And after it's destroyed, Yuna's let go and god damn, she did that? And she's only a summoner? Yeesh, imagine how much destruction she would do if she picked up Monk instead. As things calm down, Yoshi notices that the boat has similarities to Riku's and explains that they saved his life before arriving in Besaid. Yuna asks if someone named Sid was on the ship, who was her uncle that she never ended up meeting, meaning that Yuna is partially Al Bhed. Lulu gives Yoshi a warning to
don't tell Waka about Yuna's lineage. The thing about Waka, he never had much love for the Al Bhed.
Whoa! I gotta tell Waka.
I thought I told you not to tell Waka. The game! Oh.
With the signal out, Waka and the team go all out in the last 30 seconds, performing the sick move where he takes a tackle, uses the momentum to position, and launch himself off the player's back to score the game-winning shot. Unfortunately for Waka, that tackle hurt him pretty badly, and the final game against the Luca Goers is starting soon. So he decides to let Yoshi take his place while he rests, while also leaving a parting message for any future Aurochs. And now it's time for me to attempt to explain how the fuck Blitzball works. Movement is probably the best place to start, as it's automatic until a member of your team has the ball. Pressing square opens the menu and stops time. You can perform a set of actions or direct your team on where to focus when the opposing team has the ball. When it comes to stats, there are 6 main ones: HP, endurance, passing, shooting, attacking, and blocking. Technically there's also catching, but that's only for the goalie, so it's only really relevant for shooting. HP is the most important stat. It slowly drains the ball carrier, is used to perform actions, and when completely drained, halves the shooting and passing stat. Attack and endurance is used when opposing players get close enough to the ball carrier and start an encounter. You have the option to break through one of them to get them out of the encounter, and the way the stats interact is simple. If the attack stat is higher than the endurance stat, then the ball will be stolen. If not, then the ball carrier will get to perform their action, which is where the rest of the stats come into play. Passing and shooting function pretty much the same. You do the thing, and as the ball travels, the corresponding stat lowers. If the stat falls to 0, it automatically fails. Like passing and shooting, the block and catching stat are functionally the same. Whenever a pass or shot happens and there's an encounter going on, the block stat will remove the amount listed from the shot or pass if successful, while for catching it will always be successful, but the amount removed is randomized in a range between 50% and 150% of the catch stat. And have you realized this is just a math game wearing the skin of a sports game? It sucks for you if you're an elementary student playing this game before you learn what the fuck a minus is. Okay, before we get to how I've been handling the match with the goers, let's clean up everything else. Techniques are special skills that take a chunk of HP to use and can be learned by marking the enemy player that used it in halftime and pressing X when the word tech copy appears. And certain techniques can cause status elements, which didn't show up in this recording session, but there's Poison, which disables techniques and increases the rate of your HP draining while holding the ball. Sleep is self-explanatory, and Wither halves the stat while it's active. Reminder, you don't learn this right before the first playable game. You learn this before Yuna gets kidnapped, so good luck if you forgot anything crucial about this mode. Checking in on the game of the goers, I've managed to prevent them from scoring a single point before halftime. However, they have done the same to me. Once the second half of the game starts, I get to show off the Jack Shot, which will knock away 2 players in an encounter and adds 5 points to the shooting stat. Naturally, it scores with nobody around to block it. However, it's not long before they score a goal themselves. As the 3-minute mark hits, the crowd suddenly starts cheering for Waka to enter the field. Hearing this, Yoshi decides to let Waka finish the game in his place, and with the crowd getting hyped, it's time for this game to reach its conclusion and give Waka the send-off he deserves. There's no way I can fumble this opportunity. I fumbled the opportunity. After that, not quite as embarrassing loss as it would normally be for the Aurochs, Yoshi re-enters the field to congratulate Waka for second place, but is interrupted when the stadium is attacked by an army of fiends, and as Waka and Yoshi get out of the field, we see that Auron has been here for the entire game. There's a battle with just him, and he's so cool he takes out the enemy with a single attack. Afterwards, Waka and Yoshi run to them, and before Auron can explain what's going on, another fiend shows up, functioning as a proper tease to what Auron is capable of. As more and more fiends overrun the stadium, Seymour summons the Aeon Anima to destroy all of them. And if you thought my rant about Auron in Kingdom Hearts 2 was unnecessary and out of place, then get ready for me to tell you about the unfortunate fate of Anima in Final Fantasy XIV's Endwalker expansion. A character teased before the game release that everyone expected would be a trial leading to potentially Anima-themed weapons from the Extreme Trial. And when the expansion dropped, we got to see how it took cues from its Final Fantasy X version that I won't get into to avoid spoiling both game stories, only for it to end up as a dungeon boss! There was never going to be an Extreme version with Anima weapons. I mean, in hindsight, the actual next trial was way cooler and a much bigger twist, but man, I still remember how disappointed I was when I thought it was just a dungeon boss. Anyways, now that the fiends have been dealt with and Auron has finally been found, Yoshi takes this chance to lay into Auron for getting him into this mess. Here we get some definitive answers to Yoshi's questions. First things first, the Jek that defeated Sin with Braska 10 years ago was the same as Yoshi's father. After Sin was defeated, Auron traveled to Zanarkand to watch over Yoshi until Sin's attack to bring him to Spira, which was a request from Jek. And with all this talk with Jek again, Yoshi asks if he is alive. Initially, Auron gives indirect answers, saying it depends on what he defines as alive, that Jek is no longer human, and that he must have felt something of Jek when he came into contact with Sin, which... And this one has him swimming through the destruction towards Jek's voice. Oh dang, before revealing the horrible truth to Yoshi that Jek is... a dirty Sin main doing fuck-ass shit like this! Wait, no, hold on. What I meant to say is that Jek is Sin. After this big ol' info dump, Auron offers to become Yuna's guardian, on the condition that Yoshi becomes one as well, all while keeping the fact that Jek is Sin a secret from everyone else. And... hey, wait a minute. I recognize this place. This is a historical monument. A place that's home to a voice acting moment so terrible that it transcends the confines of this game, to the point where this single moment is what people remember Final Fantasy X for. This colossally bad voice acting moment is... intentionally bad, because the context is that Yuna is attempting to cheer Yoshi up after he just heard the worst news of his entire life, so he does a fake laugh to get himself into a better mood. By the way, this is how he actually sounds when he's laughing. It's a real shame that the scene is as misunderstood as it is, because it's another great bonding moment between Yuna and Yoshi that only gets remembered as the stupid laugh scene. Of course, that's not going to stop me from isolating the laugh and using it anytime I can for both hilarious and hilariously unfunny moments. And with the Blitzball arc in Luca concluded, we can focus on the pilgrimage for the rest of the game. The next temple is located in Jose, and it's a long ways away from Luca. Up first is the Mi'ihen High Road. At this point in the game, when you go to a save point, you'll be given the option to go play Blitzball. You can also recruit people to join your team, however, I'll be ignoring that for the time being. Auron gets his tutorial here. Armored enemies start to show up now, and they take minimal damage from normal attacks, but they have a weakness to piercing attacks, and with Auron's katana? He can easily deal with them. However, this trait is shared with Kimahri's weapons, so what makes Auron special? Well, he has the ability to debuff the enemies with his break skills, which lowers the associated stat. His overdrive command has you hitting buttons in a sequence to do more damage as well. As for any other battle-relating happenings, here I encountered a bomb, a reoccurring enemy in the Final Fantasy games, and halfway through the battle I remembered something about these guys. Their signature ability is self-destruct, and in the series, blue mages have been known to learn said ability, and whenever Kimahri gains a new enemy skill, his overdrive gauge is maxed out, which means... go get him, Kimahri! On the non-battle side of things, we get news from these Chocobo Knights that there have been sightings of a fiend that's been eating Chocobos. Yoshi suggests that they should go fight it, and when Auron asks why they should, he argues that it's the right thing to do, which is objectively correct, because in Final Fantasy, there is no objective more just than saving Chocobos. Saving the world is only second to that. The other main thing in Mi'ihen that we see are some side characters, who you'll be encountering a few times throughout the journey. There's Mei-chan, a scholar who's been traveling the world to learn all about Sphera's history and has a fantastic voice.
A terrible testament to Sin's power. I tremble every time I see them.
Shalinda, an alkalite who's seen attempting to stop a crusader from using Machina to no avail, and Belgamine, a summoner who will challenge Yuna to summoner duels throughout the story while also showing off a risk-reward mechanic with the Aeons, where you can defend but earn no overdrive gauge, or increase damage taken but gain overdrive instead. And oh right, I completely forgot about Ifrit! If I'm being real, this is probably my favorite version of Ifrit in the series. For one, the way he's summoned is really cool, emerging from the ground under Yuna and catching her as they fall before letting out a ferocious roar. His special ability is like the inverse of Valefor's, dealing high damage but potentially giving your opponent an extra turn to work with. And the overdrive is one hell of an upgrade. Hellfire starts him launching the enemy into the air with orbs of fire, charges up a big shot to keep him in place, and then pulls a huge chunk of the ground and chucks it at him, and it's fucking baller! About halfway through, there's a rest stop that Oren decides the group should stay at. However, Wakka's racist ass strongly disagrees, since these rest stops belong to an Al Bhed. But there's no real evidence that the owner has any relation to the ones that kidnapped Yuna outside of their lineage, so they end up resting there in spite of Wakka's objections. Inside, there's this random guy who gives you a special item for the Spirit Grid, which removes those locks I mentioned in the last part, meaning I'm finally going to talk about how the Spirit Grid works. Damn, 2 tutorials in 1 episode. I'm on fire here. The Sphere Grid is the leveling system this game uses, and there are 2 important resources that it uses, levels and spheres, both of which are obtained from winning battles. And leveling is pretty much self-explanatory, however, leveling up doesn't immediately give you benefits. Spheres are what actually increase your stats and give you new abilities. Now, you might look at that and think, well, if spheres are what increase stats, then what's the point of leveling up? Well, because in order to actually use them, your character's position on the grid has to be either on or right next to a node in order to use a sphere to get the benefit. Moving on new nodes uses up 1 level per node, while backtracking uses 1 level for 4 nodes. Every character has their own unique place on the grid where they start, dictating the kind of role they fulfill. For example, Yoshi starts in the upper area of the grid, and following the path shows many speed-based skills, like the spells Haste and Slow, Extract Speed, and Delay Attack, with the last skill being Quick Hit, and if you manage to get past the locked node, you'll end up in Yuna's part of the grid to give him more support options. But how does one get past these locked nodes? Well, it's with these key spheres, and using them on the appropriately leveled lock will convert it into an empty node, allowing access to that node and the ones after that to every character. But it's not just used to sneak into a different character's grid path. It can also be used to get into side routes, effect or stat increases or abilities. The biggest example being a spell without parallel, Ultima, which is located in the direct center of the grid, locked behind a minimum of 3 level 4 locks. Now, I mentioned that each character has a unique part of the grid where they start, but the thing about that is Kimahri's position. He's placed around the center, meaning you can basically build him into whatever role you feel like. Want a backup healer in case Yuna bites the dust? Go northwest. Want to get the thief abilities earlier than you're supposed to? Head southwest. Want to make him even more like Auron? Well, it's going to take a while because he's the only character not directly connected to the center. As for me, I don't know how I'm going to build Kimahri. I guess I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. If you think limiting this customization to 1 character is lame, then maybe the Expert Sphere Grid is more your style. It places every character near the center and allows for more opportunities to hop on a different character's path. The possibilities with the Expert Grid are hilarious. Turn Wakka into a Black Mage, make Auron into a weak but fast thief character, or even turn Yuna and Lulu into physical tanky powerhouses the rest of the party relies on for protection. One more detail about the Sphere Grid that I should really talk about is the empty nodes. These can be converted into standard stat increase nodes by using special spheres. However, I must warn you to not use them as soon as possible because luck spheres are very rare, and if you convert an empty node to a luck node, you'll be forced to either not use your levels until you get the sphere, or be forced to backtrack so it can actually be useful. And that's the Sphere Grid. Overall, an interesting leveling system that can give you insane customizability, and since you have to manually increase your stats by using it, I can't help but wonder what a theoretical no Sphere Grid run challenge would be. Except, before I even wrote this part down in the script, my YouTube feed recommended me a video that showed that not only existed, but it's a fucking speedrun category. Back to the main event, Yoshi decides to head outside for a bit before sleeping, seeing Yuna gazing out towards the sunset, wishing to live in a peaceful world without fear of Sin's destructive force. Yoshi reminds her that she will be after defeating Sin, but she counters by reminding him that Sin will just come back. Now, the obvious rebuttal to this argument is to just beat Sin again, which Yoshi does suggest, however all she has to say to that is, I wish I could. Now, with all this talk of Sin, Yoshi wonders what Yuna thinks is the reason for Sin's existence, to which she responds with a similar reasoning as Wakka, that Sin is a form of punishment for humanity. Yoshi ponders what people did that caused this to happen before remembering that it was because of the use of Machina, and wonders if it was actually that bad or not. And this question sticks with Yuna, since the idea never really came to her. Before heading back in for the night, Yoshi asks one last question. How is someone supposed to defeat Sin? According to her, the only way is with the final summoning, which calls forth the final Aeon. In order to summon said Aeon, summoners must travel to the far north to the ruins of Zanarkand, where the pilgrimage ends. The next day, as Yoshi's about to head out, the owner of these rest stops walks in. His name is Rin, and there are two main things I want to mention. Firstly, I really like his voice. Very friendly.
I am Rin, owner of this establishment.
Secondly, he gives a brief overview about learning the Al Bhed language, which I already talked about in like the first 9 minutes of this review. Like, come on Rin, are you not one of the 11 people that watched the first part to this review? But before Rin gets the chance to answer this question, because he absolutely has the ability to hear me and respond, someone screams out that the chocobos are in danger. So of course we head out to help, but are greeted by this ugly thing! Good lord, it's hideous! And it's the fiend that's been eating chocobos? Not a problem though. I have the perfect plan to change its ways. Murder. At this point, bosses start to have a respectable amount of health, so you better start going up a plan. The Chocobo Ear has 2 main attacks. Your Next, where he points at a party member and follows up with Fist of Fury to deal a lot of damage on said party member, and his Charge Attack, which knocks the entire party back, and that's important because there's a big pit right behind the party, and if they get knocked in, the battle ends in alpha game over, but you now have to live with the knowledge that you let the Chocobos die that day. Oh yeah, you don't get any XP, but who actually cares about that? And unfortunately, I failed. But I refuse to let the Chocobos die, because like I said, there is no objective more just in Final Fantasy than saving Chocobos, so I reset the game and went in again. Now, the idea of this fight is to use piercing attacks to knock him over and deal enough damage to push him back. However, I decided to use Ifrit to not only do that, but also deal some pretty nice damage, since with careful use of Yuna's Overdrive, you can get 2 Hellfires out of a summon on top of the potential to knock the boss back. And with this knowledge I acquired, I am able to put out enough damage to easily kill the Chocobo Ear and save the Chocobos. Rin rewards the group with a free rental Chocobo to use for the rest of the Mi'ihen High Road, so defeating the boss is definitely worth the effort, because when riding Chocobos you can interact with these feathers to take side routes and collect treasure exclusive to the Chocobos. And to top it all off, you get one of the best versions of the Chocobo theme. Although you can only use them in specific areas of the game, so you won't be able to take them outside of Mi'ihen. Reaching the north end of the high road, the way is blocked off due to a Crusader operation going on in the next area, the Mushroom Rock Road. And not even summoners can pass through, as Donna has been trying to convince the Crusaders to let her through for a while. Something to note here is that the Crusaders have been introduced as early as Besaid, but I decided to wait until now to actually talk about them, since they weren't really relevant until now. The group's purpose is to protect Spira from Sin, but not in the same way summoners do. They more so try to get it away from the settlements of Spira. It's why villages and towns can stay standing, let alone a place like Luca. In Besaid we are introduced to 2 Crusaders, Luzu and Gata. Luzu being the more experienced one, while Gata is the newbie that is eager to prove his worth, despite his questionably colored clothing that gives Riku a run for her money. And believe it or not, this pair is actually part of the mission as well, transporting a package for the mission. Although we can't follow them since, like I said, not even summoners are allowed to pass through. Luckily, as the group head out to wait, Seymour shows up and offers to let them into Mushroom Rock. What a nice thing to do! Entering Mushroom Rock, Wakka is upset to see that Seymour is endorsing the Crusaders' operation due to the fact that Machina and the Al Bhed are involved. And when he gets the chance to ask Seymour why he's letting them do this instead of fulfilling his duties as a maester and stopping them, he states that despite the impure methods, he recognizes their motives are pure and decides that as a citizen of Spira, he will allow the operation to proceed. Wakka doesn't accept this answer and tries to bring attention to the forbidden use of Machina, to which Seymour simply states to pretend you didn't see them. This catches the group off guard, and when told that a maester shouldn't be saying things like that, Seymour once again states to pretend he didn't say it. Before the group races too far, a Crusader arrives and notifies the group that Seymour has requested Yuna's presence at the command center, so the pilgrimage will have to be delayed for now. On the way, we encounter Wakka, a traveling merchant that was been seen earlier on the boat, and I'm only bringing him up now because in any other situation he was in would blow out that section. At first, all you can do is lend him some gil, which will decrease the price of his items depending on how much gil you give him. Every other time he shows up, he can sell some pretty strong gear, so it's always a treat to run into him. The other interesting thing is that Yoshi learned a new overdrive mode. One thing I didn't mention in the battle overview is how the overdrive gauge actually fills up, and that's because it all depends on the mode you have set. At first, everyone starts with the Stoic mode, which increases the gauge upon taking damage, while the Warrior mode Yoshi unlocked increases the gauge upon dealing damage, thus increasing his overdrive output by an insane amount. Anyway, this area at first looks like a generic rock area, but it has these cool elevators that have water flow out of them when they move, so it has that going for it. And right before arriving at the command center, we see Luzu and Gata once again. Gata is upset that he's been stationed away from all the action, since fighting Sin is why he wanted to become a Crusader, and he runs off when he doesn't get his way. With Luzu alone, and seeing the group has been let through, he takes this opportunity to tell Wakka something about Chapu that he's been keeping from him. And despite Lulu's objection, Luzu reveals that it was him who got Chapu to become a Crusader. And Wakka takes this information about as well as you can imagine, and brings up that Chapu promised him that when he won a tournament, he would propose to Lulu. Luzu, wanting to make sure Wakka understands why Chapu went for the idea, mentioned that Lulu's safety was far more important to him than being in a relationship with her. But before the conversation go any longer, the Crusaders are notified to head to the beach and get into position for the mission. After hearing this unfortunate news, Wakka, most likely letting the anger from the previous conversation and his general hatred of Machina get to him, takes it out on Machina Cannon. Yoshi notes how much Wakka seems to despise them, and Lulu explains that Chapu actually left his sword in Besaid in favor of using a Machina weapon made by the Al Bhed. Although Wakka is very quick to deny that's the reason he hates Machina, and, by extension, the Al Bhed. Arriving at the command center, there's another Maester here, Maester Kinak, although his presence makes a lot more sense since he's also the commander of the Crusaders, and here we learn what exactly the plan is for this operation. At the beach, there's a Sin spawn that's been intentionally left alive, acting as bait to bring Sin over, and the Crusaders will be holding Sin off until the Al Bhed's weapon is ready to fire at it. It's not a half-bad plan. However, Kinak can be heard offhandedly telling Auron that he's aware that the operation is going to fail, and that they'll just let them dream a little longer. As the operation starts, things already start to go wrong as the Sin spawn escapes, and it's up to our heroes to take it down. The Sin spawn Gui has 4 main parts to attack. The head, which will cast a powerful spell after it starts shaking, but can be prevented by damaging it. The 2 arms, which protect the main body from being damaged and are considered armored, so using Auron and Kimari to take them out is recommended. However, they will eventually regenerate. And the last part is the boss itself. And this is a really good boss. It's intimidating, powerful, and the design of the encounter is great. I mean, it's not the first time that Square has made a boss with the same design, as it's almost identical to the Exor boss fight in Super Mario RPG. I mean, there's no instant kill glitch with Geno, but I don't think people would consider that a feature. Upon defeating the boss, we get this sick as fuck shot where the background's in CGI and shows that our good old pal Sin got the Crusaders' party invitation. As the Crusaders attempt to fire at Sin and deal with its lesser spawns, it lets out this crazy shockwave that wipes out nearly all of the Crusaders, while knocking everyone else out. As Yuna is recovering from this attack, the Sin spawn gets back up and attempts to attack, only to be held back by Seymour, thus starting the battle all over again, with the party of Yuna, Auron, who happened to still be nearby, and the temporary party member that is Seymour. Now, if you just got an aneurysm from hearing that this fight happens again, it's no big deal. Because not only does it have less HP, but with Seymour in the party, he makes this fight a complete joke, as he has insane stats, a ridiculous amount of MP, and access to the tier 2 black and white spells, so yeah, no big deal here. And it seems like the Al Bhed's weapon is ready to fire. It seems to work for a few seconds, until Sin counterattacks and destroys the weapon, along with the pilots. Yoshi is seen at the beach, and he wakes up to see the dead bodies of many Crusaders, with the only survivor being Gata, who appears to be suffering from Sin's toxin. After this moment, Yoshi looks back at the ocean and watches as Sin retreats. Now, considering that he just found out that his father has been Sin this whole time, he gets real upset seeing Sin leave and chases after him. And as he gets closer, he gets this vision of this strange location where all the Crusaders who died are wandering around, and unfortunately, Luzu is one of them. Then the same strange hooded child shows up, shakes his head, and walks away as a blitzball hits Yoshi in the face, and the scene changes into a flashback of Yoshi's childhood, where it reveals Jack's alcoholic nature. And after all this, Yoshi washes back onto the shore and is left to wonder how many died today, and delivers this iconic line.
People die and Yuna dances. When will she stop dancing? When will it stop?
Auron can later be seen confronting Kinak about the operation, asking if he's satisfied. And after all that's happened here, and the fact that we're very close to Jose, where Chapu's corpse was discovered, I can't help but wonder. This isn't the first time an operation like this has occurred, has it?